7:09, I'll call the meeting to order. We did it, everybody. So the first item is our roll call.
Rich Gussenberg. Sean Kimball. Sarah Stevens-Morley.
Here.
Jeff Solon. Greg Rosenblatt. Chris Daddy. Megan Rockwell.
Here.
Dennis Ryu.
Here.
Chuck Knapp.
Here.
Thank you.
We're pleased to be conducting the smallest meeting, but we are at quorum, so it's good. Now it's the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next item is public comments or correspondence, and we have two members of the public here. Is there any additional things you'd like to add? Just
No, I'm just,
we received a very nice printout of Walter's. These are like certifications.
correct.
And I took a picture, so I'll share that with the committee. He's volunteered come help. And a neighbor from the north end. I'm sorry, I've already forgotten your name.
That's right, Karen Schnitzer,
Karen.
and I live at Currier Woods.
Thank you so much for joining. There is no other correspondence in our mailbox or via any of the social media channels. Jeff is here.
Pardon me?
The next item is the approval of the meeting minutes from May 11th, which you should all have in your email from Rich along with the agenda for today. Let's see. Does, I guess, so for minutes, do we need a motion just to discuss them? Is that right? Okay.
Motion, second discussion.
Great. I'm just acing this sharing.
It's the first day, and we still got the training wheels on.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes from April 11th, May 11th? May 11th.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
We have the two items, right, that Rich
Yeah.
wanted to.
Right.
Yes, so those two items.
Right.
um,
Yep, in attendance, noted as the vice chair,
Thank you.
and then the description of the two enrollment reports erroneously notes that NASDAQ study shows a slight increase in student enrollment. So those two we would
Add
Right.
it, yeah.
add to the minutes.
So is there a vote to approve as amended? Is that right?
Motion.
Motion to approve as amended.
All in favor?
All in favor?
I wasn't here that day.
Okay,
You need to,
all right.
who's that?
Four.
You two. Yeah, you know.
Doesn't pass. Doesn't pass.
All right.
We'll table it for the next. We'll
Table
do
it.
again.
Okay, moving right along. Action on submitted invoices, if any. Do we have any submitted invoices? No, please. Okay.
No.
Great. Well, let's keep going to the chairman's report. Unfortunately, we do not have,
I just spoke to him, he's
Okay.
logging in now.
okay, perfect.
Maybe
So-
we'll come back to that.
Yeah, something that we can talk about, although I think everyone here has given their summer schedule availability, right? Oh,
I
okay.
sent it to Rich today.
Yes, I saw that. Okay, let's do some arm twisting if you haven't replied.
You could have hit a minute, there he is. All right, Rich, can you hear us?
Sorry about that, guys. I was playing with my grandson and lost track of time.
No problem.
That's okay.
Yep.
You joined at just the right time, Rich, because we just got to the chairman's report section of the agenda.
So
Well, you're the chairman.
This is good though, because you can correct me if anything goes off the rails. So, the first thing on the list, it's not this, not this. So I have approximately 15 Google Drive windows open, and none of them are the right thing. Here we go. So. The first thing to talk about is the issuance of the RFQ for the commissioning agent. That was issued on May 16th, and the deadline for questions is on May 30th. Rich has already added this to our Google Calendar. The deadline for the RFQs is June 2nd. The RFP will be issued June 9th. RFP will be due June 28th, and then the RFP interviews scheduled for July 6th, 2024. And anticipated award would be July 11th, the following week. So you don't have any questions, discussion?
Do we have a meeting on the 8th?
Great question.
Should we go second Thursday, or is
That would be the second, first and first.
it? Yeah, I guess so.
So there's.
You're talking about your meeting in July?
June.
Oh, June.
So we're gonna have to select the RFQ, if it's doing the second one, we're gonna have to select it before the RFQ goes out.
Yep.
We got a meeting,
Yep.
Well, we have a meeting on the 8th.
just put that on the agenda for you.
Yeah, that'll be it. So, in reviewing that schedule, there's an item for discussion, which is, do we, as a whole, wish to hire the commissioning agent and go through the same process that we did for all of the previous hires? Or should we appoint a smaller 3-person subcommittee to conduct the review and make recommendations to the committee?
I think it ties into the schedule overall, and just like the best use of everybody's time. We went to 2 meetings a month to select the architect, CM, the owners, rep and everything. I mean, I don't wanna keep meeting every 3 times a month, so if we can streamline some of the stuff on the side with a select few that are gonna hire a commissioning agent, which I don't think we need everybody to do, I'm all for it.
Would agree. Same thing with the third-party reviewer, the
Yeah.
special inspector.
I think, from where I sit, I don't have a lot of experience, not that I had much experience with architects and construction managers. I would, if I were gonna sit on a smaller group, I would wanna make sure that there are people who are more familiar with that work than I certainly have. Otherwise, I would feel better in a large group. But if there are people who feel like they have a solid working knowledge of those, different entities, then certainly anything we can do to reduce the meeting schedule, particularly for you volunteers that are already pretty taxed.
I don't mind volunteering.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I don't mind doing it, I don't think we need to get together 2 times a week to do it, and
Yeah.
we'll knock it out pretty quick.
Yeah.
It's a commission.
I would be happy to help you guys, because I think you have a knowledge that I don't possess. Certainly, if anybody else wants to do it, I'm happy to follow. My meeting schedule's pretty packed.
So I think that's the additional question, right, is are there 3 people on the committee who feel sufficiently qualified and have the time to do the subcommittee work. And so we have two.
I would shy away from calling it a subcommittee too, because a subcommittee carries a lot more stuff.
Yeah.
It can just be a
Selection
task that-
committee.
Yeah, it's a selection, yeah.
Ad hoc view.
Because it's not even, we're not even making a decision, we gotta bring that back to the full committee.
That's
Can't
a
even
great
sort of
point.
motion. Subcommittee, we gotta record, we gotta take minutes, everything else, so.
With a post.
And the thought being that then if there were interviews, the entire committee would be part of that, or that would still be just small ad hoc working group?
It would still be the small ad hoc
In the
group, and then
past,
we would
it's
come
been-
back and make a recommendation to the full committee, and then you can either accept or reject that and go from there.
So you have to trust their judgment.
I trust everyone implicitly.
Rich or Chris?
Yeah. Rich, do you have feelings on this point?
Well, I pretty much agree with what everyone said. You know, we put in a lot of time and effort on the first three hires. I think from what Jeff D'Onofrio has said, we've got a number of other positions yet that we're going to be looking at. I don't think necessarily the entire committee has to be involved with every aspect of that. I think having, you know, 3 people who can go through the RFPs, do the interview, and make a recommendation to the full group would be fine with me. I have no problem with that. And I think, you know, we can spread that around. You know, if 3 people volunteer this time around, then we'll, you know, maybe use a different 3 people the next time around, so that you know, you end up being on 1 out of every 3 hires that's coming up.
We don't have to finalize that today because
Yeah, we don't have the,
we're meeting with the 8th.
yeah, so we could, I think it would be nice to have the full committee present to talk about that, and I think at the next meeting, we'll all be here.
Should be.
Yeah, but we will have to do is get the qualifications, everything next Friday, we'll have to get those somehow between then and the Thursday, the 8th. Review
Right.
those and be able to make a short list, if there's more than 4.
That's true too.
So, I think that in terms of getting the actual packets, that's something we could probably talk about offline with Eurofishon. And then communicate out to the committee once we have a plan for pickup, and hopefully we can get those ahead of time so we can make the most of our June 8th meeting. Is that a good plan?
And the last couple hires, you know, we've looked at, do we do 2, do we do 3, do we do 4? You know, I have no idea what we're going to get. You know, Jeff seemed to indicate that we might get a number of people. But it may very well be that we have only a couple that we choose to do interviews with. So it won't be that onerous.
That sounds good. Okay, so we will make a final decision about who would serve on this 3-person ad hoc working group at the next meeting, and we will follow up with the committee about picking up our packets before the 8th meeting, so we have some time to review before that meeting. Any further discussion on that before we move on? Okay. So now we get to go to the architect's update, finally.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So we have a 1-page summary of the work that's been completed and the work that's ongoing or in progress. Since we've last met, our Norton site survey has been completed, our North End site survey, the field work has been completed, and we're awaiting the final CAD background. We did receive enough information from the civil engineer to have some of these documentations to facilitate our initial concept discussions. The North End is under the Norton survey in front of you. Along with that, the traffic counts have been completed, and this week pickup and drop-off observations are being conducted at Norton by the traffic engineer. We have landed on an OSCGNR prep meeting date for Wednesday, June 7th at 9 a.m. So one of the things that we will be circulating amongst the project team, really the only requirement for that is to make sure that we have the SCG 3000, which is the project team roster. That's really the only requirement that we need at the prep meeting. So we'll be circulating that around to make sure that we get everybody's contact information correct, etc. Our civil engineer and landscape architect, Banesh, has reached out to the Town of Cheshire Planning and Development Department to schedule a preliminary meeting to understand the regulatory schedule, just as a initial reach out. I'm sure they're aware that this project is in the queue, but the earlier conversations we can have, the better control over the schedule, as well as make sure that we can address any known issues or known focus points that the regulatory agencies have, so that we can address those on the front of the design. We also, last week, scheduled, we alluded to this at our last committee meeting regarding some additional special education program, specifically for Norton. We held a meeting with Cheshire Public Schools, Jeff and Vin and some of the faculty members last week to discuss the addition of 2 ABA classrooms, or intensive education classrooms, as well as a sensory seclusion room. So we've been able to identify the size of the rooms as well as their required adjacencies. We're going to hold that to track it through some of our preliminary schematic design layouts to understand whether or not we have a legitimate square foot issue to deal with, or to see if there's any creative ways that we can encumber these additional rooms within the overall building footprint. We have held a meeting last Monday, a week ago Monday, with Arcadis and ONG to go over the design schedule. So I think we have landed on that, and I believe that will be the subject of probably the next committee meeting. We also, I mentioned the special education meeting. We also had a Board of Education update last Thursday evening. It was generally well received, a lot of comments specific to energy and energy efficiency with the building. Once we got over a hurdle of a question of the overall size of the buildings, most of the questions revolved around sustainable systems, etc. Those are part of our upcoming meetings with the working group. So in general, the BOE was engaged and highly interested in the project. I would say. Would you disagree with that? Okay. We also held this Tuesday our 4th working group meeting, where we started to go over. This was more of a highly interactive meeting of the group. We met in person. We think that that's actually a pretty good strategy to get more engagement from the broader group. We have included the slide deck that we went over. So we started with some visual identity slides, just to go over some of the familiar territory that we have in the past about drawing from some of the historic, the history in Cheshire, as well as overall identity of farm and fields at the North End site and woods and trails at the Norton site. So we went from that into a couple of context and culture slides, as well as some materiality slides, kind of digging a little bit deeper to understand, what perhaps some of the flavor or the appeal from the working group is, as well as some graphics that we may be able to draw on. So that was really a beginning exercise. We had a couple of breakout sessions where we asked the working group to assemble a collage of some of these images, so that we could kind of put a color or picture board collage together to kind of start drawing from some of these images. So that was just a way to kind of get the creative juices flowing before we started to get into some schematic design layouts, as well as go over some of the important things that we want to make sure that we're addressing from program adjacencies, site approach, and site amenities. So what you have in front of you here on the table are a couple of large site plans for both Norton and the North End. These are at 1/32 scale, so 1 inch equals 32 feet. So we started to overlay some just initial organizational concepts, linear scheme, and Jeff, what do we call it? A central scheme or?
3 different schemes.
Three different schemes. We had an orbital scheme, a central scheme, and a linear scheme. So we had some graphics on the screen to show how these layouts can work with approach to the building, vehicular approach to the building, parking, pickup and drop off, as well as playscape, locations for playscapes, etc. We had gone a little bit deeper by breaking out some of these programmatic elements into their own individual pieces in an attempt to foster, some more creative thinking in terms of laying these spaces out on the site. I'll be honest with you, we spent a couple hours in the office today playing around with them based on some of the feedback that we received at Tuesday's meeting. I would be happy, so some of our next steps, we have our think tank, our think tank sessions next week on Tuesday and Thursday of next week. We have preparation for our prep meeting. We need to finalize our site due diligence, which more or less means getting our completed North End survey as well as our traffic analysis. And then we need to start getting into more of a development of our design options for each site. So I know that's kind of a broad summary. We'll be happy to get into some of the material if you have any questions regarding the site layouts. The one thing to mention regarding our site plans here, we're showing the property boundaries as well as the property setback lines, the topography lines, as well as wetlands that are apparent on both sites. So that kind of informs where the building is positioned, as well as where we can have outdoor space.
And I guess on the north site, there's an easement going through, so we show that as well. It's
Yeah.
shaded similarly, it's underneath, but.
Why don't we, I think we would probably.
So, the intent is to utilize these as we move forward with, schematic designs. We're gonna refine the buildings, refine the parking layouts, plus drop off, parent drop off. But you can start to see, yeah, this is the sewer. So when you start overlaying, the wetlands after they were flagged, this is the setback, so you can encroach, but
Yeah, get up here and take a look.
we would likely want to stay out of the dotted blue line, and then this yellow is basically the setbacks as per zoning. So the lines, these lines that you see, these dotted lines represent the topography, and each one of those represents a foot drop. So there's about at the road, Marion Road, you're about 180, 185, and in the middle of the site, you're at like around 150, 155. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with it, but it's a gentle kind of slope. It's great sledding hill. But we think, when we start laying out some of these buildings, and then we have cutouts for parking, we have cutouts for outdoor play, outdoor education. The sites do start to get consumed, but
What is the red?
the red is, I believe, FEMA, so there's a waterway back here, so the floodplain. So,
We don't want a building on that.
these were, you're right. Yeah, right. So when you lay a 2-story building with all the program for the north site, that's kind of what it looks like, and then when you start adding parking and play areas and drop off, it starts to, it starts to fill the site. So I think there's, it's a pretty good dialogue about the buildings themselves, less about the site. Our site civil landscape engineers were there as well, so they heard everything that we did, and then the intent is to come back. It's gonna be a process, right? We're gonna show a couple more options. We heard comments about, we don't like courtyards, we would like open-ended, so in other words, we wanna look at some options where we don't have these courtyards because there's concerns about maintenance. Don't necessarily disagree, we'll study the options. There's like, as we go through this process, there's a give and take, right? So when you do that, and we got completely frustrated this afternoon looking at it, but you lose some efficiency in the building because you have longer corridors, right? So there's nothing wrong with it because we have buildings with and without them, but there's just trade-offs. So we'll explore options showing these courtyards open, showing them closed, and vice versa, so you can kind of see how.
And the concern, which came from, myself and Rich, the facilities director, was an enclosed courtyard. So one of the things that was suggested is, can we do either a U-shaped courtyard or just an opening in the first floor and basically your second floor would cover it. So if you position that, what's interesting, we talked about this after you guys left, if you had that opening out into this area, you could be in the courtyard and kind of looking out,
Absolutely.
Into the field and the tree line. But it is an iterative process, so we're at like step one.
Can I ask questions, or is this not the time? Or can I make comments later, or not? Later?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And you're also welcome to email me anytime with additional comments, and we read them at every meeting.
Oh, okay, thank you.
What maintenance is the concern in a courtyard? Is it cutting grass? Is that?
Well,
Getting stuff in
it's
and out.
getting in.
What do you have to get in there if it's closed off and it doesn't have grass?
Well, you'd have, if it doesn't have grass, you'd still have to maintain whatever's there. And I guess that's gonna be part of the discussion. The analogy that I'll give you is that we have enclosed courtyards at Highland, we have an enclosed courtyard at Doolittle, and we have one at Dodd,
What's
and one at the high school. You can't really maintain them, you can't get in there to cut the grass easily, and they're not used.
Yeah,
You know, and so-
really hard to utilize because of the volume. If you don't have grass, now you have a massive echo chamber in the center of the courtyard. And so, I know that's an issue way Highland is never used. Dodd is grass and it's got a crazy slope to it as well. We do use a patio off the back of the library that is in that courtyard, but there are also volume concerns there too.
And even just to get a vehicle in, even if you don't have grass, to get a vehicle into that courtyard, you're basically coming through the building. Now I will tell you this, that like a Dodd, I think that was added as part of the last edition. So we kind of enclosed something that may not have been enclosed always. That's why the planning for this is critical. If we come out that there's gonna be an enclosed courtyard, because that's the best solution, then we just wanna make sure we make all the provisions for how do we get into the courtyard, what maintenance needs are there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the observation are a few. I mean, the courtyard is not, it's really a light well. It's really what we're using it for. Because we're trying to get natural daylight to all the educational spaces. So that's the first primary purpose of it. We completely hear it because we hear it at every project, and we were talking about it before. So we hear it at every project. We have to be concerned about what's in there. How do you maintain it? How do you repurpose it? How does it evolve? Because if they're not used, we may plan something for today, it could evolve into something different 10 years from now. So I think we heard you loud and clear. We're gonna look at options to try to mitigate that, and we'll show you kind of the benefits and challenges of each. And it's your building, it's an iterative process. We wanna discuss it and show you, and you guys can decide what you think is the best overall, educationally and for the community. So, I thought it was a great meeting.
Yeah.
I think we kind of breezed over the collage a little bit, not a criticism, just, I thought that was very helpful to, you know, to visualize, right, graphics. They picked graphics that they liked, and even ones that they didn't, you know, people didn't like, and crossed them out and said, don't do this, do this. And I think that's extremely helpful
Yeah.
for us as a design team to kind of help navigate, so, so I thought it was a good process.
Really good dialogue, a lot of participation from everybody that, you know, is in that working group. And we got into some pretty good detail, I thought, you know, we talked about, you know, colors, you know, associated with each grade, and then talked a little bit about, well, what's, you know, there are other applications, like if you have a color-coded area, that might help us with some of the security elements that we have to incorporate. And then we talked about, well, does it have to be by grade? Maybe you do it by section, like grades 1 and 2 this way. If you have years in which you have more second grade, first grade classrooms, you don't have to worry about, you know, this kid is in the wrong color section. So all good stuff, I thought.
So a couple other pieces that came out were maybe look at, like around the corners, look and see if we can build in some flexibility for, like, you know, dot in, you know, future classroom here maybe, or so. Try to get that into the plan now, just to think about it at least, I think is an important piece. What we do about it long term, I don't know, TBD, but, so those I think are all pretty important but critical pieces early in the design that we heard, which is good. So,
Sean, is this Domino?
Yeah, so actually, I was just about to say that. Earlier today, I signed and the seller signed agreement on the property. We're starting the due diligence period and then hoping to close in July. With the owner then becoming a tenant for not to exceed 12 months. So figuring we won't need it other than for planning purposes for that. So we had this earlier this afternoon. Should be
Nice.
there. Barring anything during the due diligence.
So we didn't jinx it by putting it on.
I know you're safe. I noticed that though. It was literally around 2 o'clock.
Gotta swallow it up.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Any turtle sightings?
Yeah.
Any turtle sightings?
Yeah.
I don't think we,
no, I,
Who's doing the study? We are, or?
I'm not.
Okay.
There are turtles.
Yeah,
That-
there has to be a turtle study.
Okay.
There are turtles.
Yeah,
Check for turtles.
yeah, turtle check.
Sarah?
You question?
Sarah?
Yes.
Oh,
If I might, I just want to commend our architectural firm. You know, I sat in on the Board of Ed meeting, the Zoom meeting that we had about special ed, and then the working session the other day, and you get a real sense that we're moving along nicely. I think, you know, they've handled different audiences beautifully. I was especially excited when I left the working group the other day, because we got to the point where we were really looking at a lot of design features, and beginning to look at what would you take out of the north side or the Norton site, and, you know, the colors, the shapes, the things like this that you would look at as part of the building. You have that in your packet there. But it was a great conversation, and I know we have a long way to go yet, but it's the first time that you really began to see a building beginning to take shape. So it was a fun day.
I had a couple questions still. Sure. So the special education program at Norton, that's like an ask right now from the school, and you'll kind of see like how that works and what the trade-off is.
yes.
So when you say you're tracking that kind of separately, we'll kind of see what the, so that's like the give, we'll see what we're taking. to
Right.
Kind of fit that, and then that changes the ed specs, is that part of like a change in that?
So we have one opportunity, I guess, to go back and give it a shot. Now, we're gonna meet preliminarily in June, as Jeff was saying. I think it would be certainly something that we would bring up with them at that time, that our special education population is evolving, and I think there's a understandable concern that we have an intensive special education program at Highland Elementary School. It's large and proportionately large in a building that's 850 students. When that building contracts a little bit with the redistricting, it'll take up an even greater percentage of the population there. And we're just kind of uncomfortable with that. And the state has been in numerous previous with different leadership conversations flexible around meeting the demands of special education. And I think, we have a well-reasoned explanation for why we're looking to make this adjustment. We'll see. And, does it, I don't think it necessarily, may not have to necessarily compromise the square footage. It could be an add-on, but still within our budget. We'll have to work through that process. A long way from there, but, these guys heard the concern and are exploring strategies to try and address it. And I'm sure that, you guys will be creative, we'll try and find different ways. Maybe it works out, maybe it doesn't, but we're at least looking at it.
So if it can be encumbered as an addition to the overall building program, the likely path of travel is a space waiver with the state, so you're not penalized for going over. If you go over your square footage, your reimbursement rate is prorated based on that percentage that you're over. So if you're, if you're 20% over your square footage, that would be a major bust in the program. But say you're 10% over your square footage, your reimbursement rate would be augmented by 10%. Yeah. So
That's why I
space
asked, 'cause I
waiver.
remember the space waiver
Right.
conversation initially back when we had a planning department, so.
We've done entire schools that have this type of ABA or, special intensive education, that the entire school,
Right.
I've talked to you about the Learn project. That entire project is a space waiver where they don't even
Apply
really
the
don't have
clinical
a program.
standards
Right.
to that building because of the unique needs of population. And that's where we are with this group. And I think programmatically, any reasonable person would look at Highland and, like I said, the contraction and the proportion of special education and why we think it's important to distribute it geographically for the sake of our kids that live on that end of town. So there's a strong rational argument for it. And like I said, previously they've been receptive. New leadership now, but I still think we have a grounded argument to make for that. And we'll find out more.
Sarah, if I could just say, I went into it with a very open mind. I came out of it saying there's a very strong rationale and need. However, it's also been very clear that we have to work within the budget that we have. So I think, I want to make it clear to the committee that no final decisions have been made at all. We've listened to it. I think if it's possible, it really makes sense. I would hate to build a school that isn't meeting the needs of the population right from the beginning. But unfortunately, this wasn't in the ed specs that we went out to bid on or that we went out to referendum on. So we've got to start doing some pricing and see what the architects can do as they begin to do some design work before we move ahead. The Board of Ed would have to make some decisions on the ed specs at some point before we made any decision. So it's all up in the air, but we just wanted everyone to really be aware of the conversation.
One more. The last meetings you had, the core working group meetings, like the nice attendee list and summary and everything. Was it just like the nature of this meeting, that it was more of a workshop that you didn't have it, or you just not time?
We have not generated the meeting minutes from our Tuesday afternoon meeting yet.
Okay.
So
So we'll have
we'll
those
have
the
those.
next one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, usually they're in the off weeks, and it just
Yeah.
happened that they were on the same week this
Got
week.
it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anyone else in the committee have questions, comments?
The only one question I had, just looking at this first calendar, and I'm a little fuzzy on what we agreed to at the last meeting, but I had mentioned a town council meeting on, I thought, June 13th, because it was the same night as the Sustainability Strategies group. Is that still good for the team? Just an opportunity for the council to meet the three major consultant groups? If it worked for folks, otherwise we could look at July. Just want to, folks could, I guess, let that go.
We'll add that to this schedule,
The
and I
sixth.
think that we
If it was good with everyone, I thought it was, but I honestly don't remember.
Thank you. Thanks
Just,
for-
yeah, that would be great. If you could confirm or shoot me an email, I'll be planning for that meeting with the council chairman on a week from Monday.
What time does it start?
So those meetings start at 7 p.m.
Okay.
I know we have a few public hearings to start. It's just gonna be a process. Probably won't get rolling until 7:20 or so, but. And again, if it doesn't work, we can look at July. Yeah, go ahead.
When are you looking to do that?
Well, I thought we had talked about June 13th.
Yeah, it's already in the calendar, Rich.
Is it on there? Oh, you know what, I had
Yeah,
checked that calendar.
it's in the next generation school building committee calendar.
All right, perfect.
At least Rich's calendar,
Okay.
which I have fed into my phone.
Well, because I report to the town council every meeting, so
Every
that's why
regular
it's on the
Yep.
calendar. But you and I had to set a date for having all of the consultants come in, so I
Right.
didn't know when you wanted that.
Yeah, at the last, at our last meeting up in Chambers, I think with all the consultants there, we had thrown out that date as a possibility, but I don't think we had nailed it down, so, just, we can confirm after this. If it works for everyone, that's great. If not, we'd rather just do one meeting if we get everybody there, that's the other. We're good. Okay, great. Yeah, Rich, we'll follow up after that.
Okay.
Any other architecture questions for committee? Okay, then we can move on to our owner's rep section.
Thank you. So as Jeff had mentioned, Justin mentioned, we are working with ONG and Tecton on the schedule. And it's in process. There's still a lot of details that need to be worked out. But once we do get those details worked out, we'll have a detailed schedule from ONG, and then what we'll do as our part is we will summarize it so that it's a more condensed, presentable schedule so that the public can see it and understand, some of the major milestones. So similar to what was done previously. So that's in process, and we'll be able to present it at the next meeting. We've also met with Board of Ed and town staff to go over the budget. That is in process. Emily Fuentes is working on that. I think she's gotten some information from your office, Vin, and from the town also on details. So we're in process of doing that. In addition, we are also doing a recommendation on invoice review approvals, and we will have that we actually have that down. We'll be able to present it to the whole committee so that they can understand what the flow chart's going to be on process for going through, reviewing, and approving invoices. I don't think we've seen an invoice from anybody yet, have we? No.
No, but one question I do have is, who wants to see the format? We drafted up a template of our invoice. Who wants to review that?
I'm sure.
Well, I certainly would like to see it. Emily,
Emily's gonna wanna see
loop
it.
her in as well, because we're
Yeah.
working with Emily
Yeah,
from Arcadis.
Okay.
So, we've worked with Tecton on other projects, so if it's similar, I'm sure that that's something that Emily is familiar with. But,
Oh, yeah.
we want to make sure that the school department is comfortable with the format. So,
Yeah.
And then,
Separate.
obviously, the chair, Rich Gussenberg, he
Right.
should see, because I know Rich is interested in having a process associated with the invoice approvals.
yeah, that process
So-
we'll present at the next meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ben, I know we did invoices 3 months ago. Was that on filming or what was, didn't we do invoices, Sean? On something? Small?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it was like the data
advertisement.
register.
The paper register?
Yeah, and there has been some invoicing on the legal
Yeah,
side.
limited stuff, so Does that have to get rerouted through Rich or?
Yeah, we'll have to, those are just journal entries, we'll
Yeah,
figure
they'll
that
just
out.
minor
We talked-
and small stuff,
We'll get caught up on that.
Yeah.
I'm sure they've already been paid, so
Yeah.
we don't have to go through the review on that, but
Yeah.
we will make sure that they get put into the project and that we're tracking all of those against the budget.
Yeah, it's relative peanuts, I just wanted to make sure it was accounted for.
Yeah,
We won't forget.
no, and that's typical, we get involved, there's already been
Right, some
expenditures, so
stuff,
we'll go
yeah.
back and we'll get a list of some of the invoices that have been paid,
Right.
and we'll get them into the system. So, and then the last thing that we are also working on is a process for review and approval of change orders. We do this on all of our projects. Every district has a different way of looking at things. We have some recommendations that we will make, and we'll present that at the next meeting so that it could be open for discussion, and then it'll be implemented once we get into construction. Actually, and not just construction, but any other change that happens with either consultants or other vendors. And that's all I have.
Does the committee have any questions, any discussion? Okay, thank you. Now we get to move on to the CM at risk section.
Well, I have a very short report, actually. Really, what we're doing now is working on the pre-construction schedule. Laurel Purcell, our pre-construction manager, we've had actually one meeting already with Tecton and Arcadis. We've reviewed the format. Laurel's pretty much laid out the pre-construction schedule from the time that we kind of hired through the design development phases, schematic design development, construction document phase, all of the OSC and GNR approvals, the local town approvals. So that's all going to be all laid out on this pretty detailed construction schedule or pre-construction schedule. And then, as Rich mentioned, he'll kind of dumb that down a little bit and make it a little bit easier to read. But it's a great tool that we'll use to track the entire project right up through bidding, and then we'll roll that into the construction schedule. So we'll have that for the next meeting to present to the committee.
Questions? Okay, thank you. The next item is carrying over from our last meeting, which is about the RFQ for abatement. There was some discussion where we last left off. Arcadis and Tecton were going to provide, or talk about providing data to the town attorney for development of the RFQ. Is that true? Still true?
We have requests for proposals that we can provide to
Okay.
the attorney.
Thank you. For folks who weren't at the last meeting, it's something that we need to begin the process on very soon. So we're trying to move that along as fast as possible. For Norton. Because of the demolition.
Jeff had, we had turned to Jeff D'Onofrio and asked him if he had a template for the RFQ, and he said that he needed some input from our consultants before he could do that. So that's waiting out there before we can get that RFQ put together and out the door.
Because it'd be great to at least test some of the stuff this summer while the kids aren't in school.
Right.
I guarantee
If we're gonna kick out with toxic dust, we wanna do it for the Army children. Exactly, yeah. Okay. All right. Our next item are items for future agendas. Are there any proposals for items for future agendas? Committee?
Those minutes have to be approved.
The minutes, yes, the minutes have to be approved. We're gonna try that again next meeting.
It'd be great if, at some point we could iron out a date for some community meetings, to kind of just educate. So I don't know if we want to try and, between now and then, or discuss it at that meeting, or finalize some dates, because I'd really like to be able to advertise that with as much advance notice as we can.
Yeah, I know we had we had some placeholders in our overall schedule.
Yeah.
So that, I think maybe we should have a conversation about when the best time. I don't know if that's a building committee question so much as a
I think
process.
it's probably more of us trying to get on the same page about when to do that, and then finalizing it at the next building committee meeting.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful for the committee members to know, because we have visitors from the public, who I think would be
absolutely.
to be part of, to know about when that's happening, so that'd be great.
I think you
Thank you,
wanna
Jeff.
put it in like some sort of newsletter before the end of the school year too.
That's
I
what I'm
don't read
saying,
school-
like-
I don't read school newsletters and this stuff, so.
Not in the summer, okay, thank God. Got nervous there.
I read every one of them.
Cover to cover.
Any other items for future? And that was our last item, but I know that we did have a request for comment from our public visitor, and since we didn't have an item, I'd like to let you ask your question
Oh, all
or
right.
your comment.
I just wanna double check, because I am gonna send you an email.
Great, thank you. We'll make sure to read that.
Is that color wetlands, that?
The blue.
Yes.
Is wetlands,
Mhm.
okay. And so, and you're acquiring that properties? Okay.
Yes. That's it, yeah, that was in the town budget to purchase that.
I will send you an email so you
Perfect.
have everything.
Wonderful, and then we'll read that at the next meeting
Okay,
during the
thank
public
you.
comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, our last and final item is to adjourn. I can take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? All right, that's unanimous by this.
8-0-0.
Yeah, unanimous by this here.